call upon Dr. Ugyal Tshering, Lama Yolmo, to the panel. So he will be talking on unveiling perspectives, a comprehensive analysis of reporting in Tibetan review vis-a-vis the Free Tibet movement.
Thank you so much, Jay. I shall begin. Like the moderator has already introduced, my topic for today is unveiling perspectives, a comprehensive analysis of reporting in Tibetan review from 1985 to 2005 vis-a-vis the Free Tibet movement. A very good morning to all the dignitaries present and all the fellow presenters and participants. I'm Ugyal Tshering Lama Yolmo, and I'll be presenting mostly a content analysis of Tibetan review from the year 1985 to 2005 related to the Free Tibet movement. So let's provide a small background, although you must be very well aware. Tibetan review, although it started in 1967, I was looking at it in a time frame of 85 to 2005, which I've already said, and I'll be focusing on the key themes that have been brought out through the analysis, the rhetorical strategies and the influence on the global stage. And the key question that this paper is addressing is, how did Tibetan review represent Tibet's struggle? To the historical context that I provided is the occupation of Tibet and then rise of the Tibetan diaspora. I think so these are the things that everybody has touched upon. I'll not be going into I'll be moving more into the themes that I've done. And so mostly it was about cultural preservation, political autonomy, and human rights. So these were the key themes that I actually could conjure up during my analysis, during the small time, although this is a working paper and I have not been able to entirely do it. But for the presentation today, I've been able to draw into these four overview kind of themes. The first one that we'll be looking at as Tibet as a land of cultural and religious richness. So there were various articles, editorials, and even guest editors who actually were focusing on the destruction of the monasteries, suppression of Buddhism, cultural erosion, and it framed Tibet as a unique cultural siege, and highlighted the culture of Tibet and the Tibetan people as something that needs to be preserved. So these were the things that were mostly written, and it was done on a global perspective also. So the next theme was the Tibetan diaspora and struggle for autonomy. And I think so in Dr. Roy's paper, we talked about the diasporic media and all the things that people did during their diaspora. There were a struggle for autonomy, and as we are standing here itself is a testimony to the struggle for autonomy within the diaspora, the Tibetan diaspora. So the themes that I could conjure up during my analysis was that there was an emphasis in the resilience of the Tibetans in exile and the documented efforts of cultural preservation and education. There were many, institutes that were opened up where they were culturally, and even where I come from, Darjeeling, there is a separate school where the people, Tibetan students go for their studies, their primary and secondary studies. And there's positioned the diaspora as an active agent in the fight for autonomy. So these were the themes, sub-themes that during the major theme of diaspora and struggle for autonomy. The third theme that I could come up with was the criticism of Tibetan leadership and strategy. It was not only talking about cultural preservation, it was also even talking about when there was a lack of leadership or something that they found lacking. There were very harsh criticisms from the writers, and even the editor, they critiqued the Kashag whenever their leadership, they found it to be ineffective, and they encouraged internal debate with the Tibetan movement, and it also played as an independent role beyond just advocacy. And the fourth key theme that it was a global call for support. I think so. Yesterday, in one of the panels, we were talking about how it was popularized, and even post dinner, we had a discussion on how it was popular during the 80s and the 90s, especially the 90s when they had it was almost like a pop culture thing. But how in 2022, I was presenting a similar paper on free Tibetan movement, and there was a suggestion that it had fizzled out. Today, in morning in breakfast itself, we were talking with the director himself. He said, it's not just fizzled out. Maybe the popular thing has passed out, but it has moved more into a political scenario, more serious kind of thing. So the journal itself has been looking for a global support in some sense, and position Tibet as a global cause for freedom-loving people, not only for Tibetans as a Tibetan diaspora, but every person who we would call freedom-loving people, and aligned the Tibetan struggle with broader human rights and justice movements. So these were the key themes that I could conjure up. And then we move on to the rhetoric strategies. What were the rhetoric strategies utilized by the journal? So one of the most, first and foremost, was the emotional appeal. They were highlighted, like I already mentioned in my key themes, that they highlighted how the Tibetan monasteries, the culture, and even the establishment themselves were being destroyed and conjured up. So news of that was being highlighted. And has mostly, I'm not saying all the time, mostly in most of the articles, Tibet was framed as a victim and of Chinese aggression, and it was invoking global responsibility. That they were saying that whatever is being pushed upon the situation of the Tibetans in Tibet is a global responsibility per se. And the next strategy that I actually could come up with was cultural framing. And like again, I think it might seem more repetitive, but these were the themes that I've been finding in various articles in different contexts. And it also connected the global movements for indigenous rights and religious freedom. So now, what was the role that the journal played for this particular movement that we are talking about? Is that it served as a key publication, which served as a documented and archival. Hence, I was able to actually go through what was actually been reported during that time. So as all of you know, it was a monthly journal. So monthly they have been coming up with all these things that has been used as documentations. And also they have advocated for global awareness and international action. Now when I talk about global awareness, one of the most important thing that popped up in the discussion in my last presentation was that awareness was very low. And I think so my fellow presenter Manjesh Rana is not here. No, he had done an interview, a survey where lack of awareness was pointed as one of the major reason why the third generation or the fourth generation of Tibetan and the diasporic Tibetans, they were losing out interest in Free Tibet and the Free Tibet movement. So this journal in itself provided the global awareness, not only to the Tibetans, but to even others people who are interested in Tibet and Tibetan studies, and a call for international action. And it served as a balanced advocacy with internal critics of Tibetan. It was not only always in support of or talking about talking as a victim. It also looked at the Tibetan leadership in itself, and never failed to criticize the leadership whenever they actually failed their fellow Tibetans. So these were the role. And in the freedom movement, what I could find was it actually framed the struggle. Now, like I've already said, it was not only a cultural thing, but it was also a human right issues. And I think so we had many topics and presentations where we have talked about it being a part of a human right issue. It played a crucial role. Again, global awareness and advocacy was already there, but it demonstrated the importance. Now, why I took this as because I am a media student, I am a student of mass communication. This journal in itself, I think so, is very important because it mobilized international support, and I think so it's a marginalized cause which it has given a face to and actually brought it out into a more public and global domain. So the other thing is So there are many contributions which I think so I've already talked about. I don't want to go in again, but you can see it here, the things that it had contributed to. And the limitations that I could see was that despite global awareness, lack of concrete political change due to economic and geopolitical considerations was one of the thing that this is not the limitation that I have projected, it's a limitation they have projected in their articles. My limitation is that I have not been able to entirely analyze all the articles that I have mentioned. I think so in the future I'll be able to analyze all of the articles. Now, coming to the conclusion of my paper, the key takeaways that I could find was that Tibetan Review as a journal was able to shape and give a very good narrative to the Tibetan struggle, and although it does not term it as a Free Tibet movement, I never did I see in any article it being written as the Free Tibet movement, like we know of, where we see it in the T-shirts and all the merchandise that we can find for Free Tibet. They never, but it still gave a shape to the narrative of the Tibetan struggle. It also was able to balance out the cultural preservation and call for global support, and the role of media in the advocacy for political and cultural change. And the implications, media outlets they are essential because, like I said, awareness is one of the most important factors when it comes to a cause like this. In any case, if you don't have the awareness, now we have in mass communication a model called the AIDA model, the AIDA model. So where it starts with the awareness, the interest, the desire, and the action. If you want the action, your every move comes with the awareness. And it has always been projected in our studies that media is a very strong and a primary source of awareness. So until and unless you don't have the awareness, you will not have the interest. Forget about the desire and the action. All right, so I think so this journal in itself was very essential in providing that awareness, and it contributes to media studies, political communication, and Tibetan studies, and thus I have been able to present it here. And that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ugyal. So, very much on time. 20 minutes is a quite decent time to complete our presentation, and Dr. Ugyal finished before the time. Thank you for that. And next presenter, I'd like to call upon Mr. Aditya Sharma, just scholar, International Studies, JNU. So he will be talking on navigating statelessness, the Central Tibetan Administration's diplomatic strategies in a changing global landscape.
My name is Mishra, and I am going to present the paper on navigating statelessness, the Central Tibetan Administration's diplomatic strategies in a changing global landscape. On the first part of, I have provided outline of my paper, which flows into 8 different themes and some sub-themes in some of the parts. Then in the world of international relations, that is theoretically the theme of IR, non-state actors are becoming increasingly influential, which present a challenge to traditional diplomatic models that are centered around nation states. In earlier panel, there was discussion about this theme also, that diplomacy or the theme of hegemony. But in that sense, when we talk of hegemony, it more or less statist kind of notion which comes up with the realist tradition. But what about non-state actors who don't have that much material capability or not that much authority and legitimacy to call themselves a hegemon or to act like a hegemon? A prime example of this phenomena is Central Tibetan Administration, also known as Tibetan Government in Exile. The CTA is an exceptional case study in non-state diplomacy because it operates without formal recognition as a state, but actively seeks international engagement and hence examining the Central Tibetan administration's diplomatic strategies provides valuable insights into how diplomacy is changing in the 21st century. The theoretical foundation which I have picked up is of first how it challenges the traditional notion, traditional IR theory which specifically focuses on Westphalian model that emphasizes on the state sovereignty, but it struggles because of its Westphalian tradition. It fails to explain the struggle which actors like CTA follow or they undergo. This model's limitations become clear when we consider CTS influence despite its lack of traditional state power. But on the other themes like some upcoming themes, new theories like the concept of complex interdependence and soft power, they offer a more comprehensive understanding of non-state diplomacy. Complex interdependence recognizes that in a globalized world, states are not the only player that matters. Complex interdependence also emphasizes the importance of multiple channels of contact between societies, including those established by non-state actors. And the soft power, on the other hand, refers to ability to attract and persuade rather than coerce. Because in the case of non-state actors, many a times they are not able to coerce, and some deliberately follow the strategy of not coercing others to gain more legitimacy and authority on the causes for which they are fighting for. This is particularly important for the non-state actors like the Central Tibetan administration, who lack traditional powers, resources like military strength or economic clout. They rely on the power of attraction, persuasion, and building relationships to achieve their goals. The another theory which talks about this is constructivist tradition of IR, which also attributes to our understanding of CTA's diplomatic activities. Complex constructivist approach argue about that non-state actors can become what are known as norm-entrepreneurs. That is, they shape and they argue about new kind of norms or to change the existing norms to reflect the changing realities. And their advocacy hinges on the new norms or changing existing ones on the global stage. And the CTS activities illustrates the multifaceted nature of non-state diplomacy, employing various strategies. Non-state diplomacy, which is also now increasingly called as para-diplomacy or unofficial diplomacy, encompasses a broad range of international engagements conducted by actors that lack sovereign recognition. These actors include subnational governments, non-government organizations, multinational corporations, and exiled governments. As per Peters, who argued this definition in 2022, earlier we also used to include terrorist organizations and many other such institutions also as a non-state actor, but he didn't put it terrorist organization because they lack legitimacy also. They may have legitimacy a bit to the peoples to whom they are catering, but that doesn't translate into the global influence where they will be accepted as a legitimate player for the time being. What CTA does is they follow some of the things which I have highlighted here. There are others beyond this also. Cultural diplomacy, where they use their rich cultural heritage, including Tibetan art, music, and spiritual practices, to influence audience worldwide. CTA engages in digital diplomacy quite a much, where it leverages the power of online platforms and social media for international engagement, particularly important in the digital age. And also that also pertains to the younger generations also, because they are more inclined to look at the social media than the traditional form of media. Hence, they got the newer audience also in the changing generation. They also engage in track 2 diplomacy through unofficial interactions such as dialogues and cultural exchanges to build understanding and potentially resolve conflicts. One of such definition, example of track 2 diplomacy, which I found out in JNU itself in June 2022. There was a visit by CTA administration peoples, and they JNU waived off the fees of the Tibetan peoples, with, students, which were earlier considered as foreign nationals. Hence, they have to pay the fees which incurred in JNU for the foreign nationals. From July 1, 2022, after the agreement, now they have waived off that fees, and they are now paying according equivalent to the Indian students, which is around 280 rupees for a semester, for first semester, and then 108 rupees or 9 rupees for it. From 2.5 lakh rupees coming down to 108 rupees. That was a diplomacy directly done through the institutions, and that's directly impacting the people, the students coming from Tibet. And with that also, what I also found, because in my class I had 4 Tibetan students, all were from rich families, because I was in 2021 batch in masters, but after that I found that many students from very downtrodden background from Tibetan community are coming to JNU for pursuing higher education. That shows that yes, diplomacy is working there also. That has made some changes to the people also. CT also quite much influences on diaspora diplomacy, where it works with the Tibetan diaspora, encouraging them to advocate for Tibetan interest in their host countries, wherever they are, maybe in USA and Canada, Australia, wherever they are beacons of Tibetan cause. Then how CTA navigates its diplomatic strategies. CTA has centered sophisticated diplomatic strategies to address its lack of formal recognition as a state. These strategies highlight how non-state actors are playing an increasingly important role in IR, challenging the traditional state-centric model of diplomacy. I already talked about para-diplomacy or unofficial diplomacy. What CTA does is, as already mentioned in last slide also, cultural diplomacy by promoting Tibetan art, music, spiritual practices. What it achieves by doing this, firstly, it helps preserve Tibetan heritage while in exile, ensuring its continuation for future generations. Secondly, it creates platform for informal diplomatic engagements, allowing the CTA to interact with global audience and promote its cause. Second is parliamentary outreach, where they try to engage with the parliamentarians from all around the world and establish Tibet support groups within legislatures around those countries, such as in US Congress, where recently we saw the Resolve Tibet Act being passed, which authorizes the use of fund to counter Chinese disinformation about Tibet from the USA. And earlier they also had several other laws like Tibet Policy and Support Act of 2020, which was passed by the US Congress. These groups, that parliamentary groups which Tibet CTA tries to form, they consist of sympathetic legislatures who advocate for Tibetan interest within their government, thereby providing CTA with an avenue to influence state-level policies despite lacking the formal diplomatic status in itself. They also partner with NGOs for the cause which they are fighting for, like they have forged strong alliances with international NGOs working on the issues such as human rights, environmental conservations, and cultural preservations. These collaboration amplify CTS voices on the global stage, providing resources and support for its advocacy efforts, and also that makes a larger debate and also recognition of the issues which Tibet faces. They also engage with academic institutions, like this conference is itself funded by a German think tank, Friedrich Neumann Foundation. That shows how CTA has engaged with these different NGOs, think tanks, other academic institutions which have always been supporting, and they try to ensure that they will keep supporting the cause of USA. I was wandering around and I found that lots of buildings have been funded by different institutes, like this library, besides was funded by some individuals from Switzerland. There was a building which was funded by USA, some individual groups from USA. That shows how these people are working to make changes at the ground level, which also translates into some tangible outcome coming up. Then the concept of digital diplomacy, that is all very effective to reach the global audience and also effectively bypasses traditional diplomatic channels which may not be available to the CTA for their engagement, and also mobilizing Tibetan diaspora for the cause of Tibet. Then comes the effectiveness of CTS multi-track diplomacy. In this, I have made 3 sub-themes. The first deal with how CTA employs a multi-track diplomacy approach. I will not go much in this because I already explained in last 2 slides. Official diplomacy, where they engage in lobbying efforts throughout the world, and also they try to counter the China's diplomatic clout and the resources which China puts to demean or try to forget the Tibet as a nation itself or as identity itself, to create their own kind of identity where Han identity is dominant in China, and there is no Tibet, no others living in China, or there was no Tibet at all in the Chinese thinking, which they try to project, and now that is being countered globally. They also engage in track 2 diplomacy, which focuses on engaging with academics, religious leaders, and other non-government organizations to build understanding and support for the Tibetan cause. People-to-people diplomacy, where they mobilize grassroots groups to support their and help in their awareness campaign. Media and public diplomacy, that is quite important to challenge and counter the hegemonic practices of China, where they try to portray their own narrative of history and diplomacy, which then also they forge on to leveraging international institutions like United Nations or UNESCO, etc., to promote their own interest and to safeguard the Tibetan identity and their past culture, history, etc. I also have made a very brief comparison to the other non-state actors, why CTA stands out. I have taken 4 case studies in very brief. The first one being the Kosovo Liberation Army. Kosovo, as we found, have seen or have read about it, that it got independence in 2008. But because this was a violent organization, it was supported by some countries like Albania, and then NATO also supported, and it's in support. NATO bombarded in Kosovo that region which they were asking for in 1999. But what happened recently is now they are being tried for war crimes which they perpetrated during 1996 to 1999, that period when they were quite active. Many of those leaders went to politics later on, but now they are being tried. Many of them are tried for the war crimes which they committed at the time. Even though they have got some, but they didn't got the Greater Albania for which they were fighting for. They got Kosovo, but not the Greater Albania originally for which they were fighting. We all know the condition of PLO. It was a militant organization. Now Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. are now quoting upon that, and their lack, even though they have got some good things like observer status in United Nations, but they have not achieved a meaningful result for the peoples of Palestine. Then there is a Polisario Front from Western Sahara. They are also, they didn't got anything also because of being a militant organization, and now in 2022 they were trials have been started for what they did in the past as being a militant organization. And another is East Turkmenistan, that is Uyghur movement, just beside the Tibet in China. They are also not getting much, and also they have lots of internal strife within themselves, because some follow the something that there is need of armed resistance, but other are not following that armed resistance. Then the effectiveness of CTS strategy which they have applied. There is limited success by CTA in changing Tibet's political status, but effective in preserving Tibetan culture in exile. Moral authority has been gained by the CTA through non-violence means, and they are resilient and adaptable to changes because of being they are surviving. That shows that they have been quite good at adapting for last these decades as being in exile. And also the limitation is, another limitation is of lack of meaningful autonomy for Tibet and limited influence on China's policies which are affecting Tibet. The other issue which CTA faces is balancing idealist goals with pragmatic realities, which where we see that the full independence has been now caught up with the middle way approach, where they want a meaningful autonomy. The other being the maintaining the legitimacy of historical claims while pursuing a more moderate political solution because of aggressive anti-Tibet campaign.
So, Aditya, I would like to you to wind up because we keep time for the discussion.
Yes, for 2 minutes just. And the other thing is pragmatic engagement of specific issues. They focus more on human rights, environmental conservations, cultural preservations instead of hard politics. And other thing being how they navigate their relationship with the different stakeholders like India, which itself has very troubled relationship with China, specifically since from 2020 onwards, we are seeing a very different approach in that. Then also international community, where CTA engages more on democracy and cultural preservation, etc. things for their own support, and the multilateral organizations like United Nations, UNESCO, etc. Then I will skip this and this also. Just take a look at 6. Yeah, it already been then in conclusion, CTA's role in reshaping diplomatic practices that challenges the statist notion itself, where we need to relook at the traditional IR theories and how these new actors are playing up, and also CTS diplomacy and the resilience which they have showed, that also gives solution to other non-state actors which are fighting for autonomy or self-determination in other parts of the world. And the future challenges which I see is the CTA must adopt to post Dalai Lama phase, where China has very different thinking, and it will try its level best to delegitimize the new Dalai Lama and the practices which traditionally Tibet has followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aditya, for a comprehensive presentation on CTS diplomacy, bringing the different theoretical perspectives. Now I would like to call upon for third speaker of the panel, Ms. Aditi Krishna. She is an independent researcher. She will be presenting on fostering care communities in famous events, Balloon.
Hello, yeah. Sangmalo Tashtale. I'm so happy to be here and presenting my paper. Before I start, I would just like to know how many of you have seen Balloon or you've heard about it. Okay, great. That's a considerable number. I think, if not all, some will understand what I'm trying to say here. A little about myself, I was, and how I encountered upon this film. I was working in a college called the Lama College in Bangalore, and it's a, yes, and it's a little hamlet. Please visit it, like a small Tibetan utopia there. You can go there. It's a really good space to be. And my colleagues had screened this film, so I thought, oh, you know, it's very ironic I'm speaking after Aditya, who has spoken of CTA and diplomacy, so I thought it's going to be one of those, you know, films which I have to sit through, and I would rather go back home and be with my cats and not be here and watch this film. But Gela insisted, and I'm really thankful, Kadrincheto, Dr. Yanthar, and Dr. Ugyal, who were my colleagues, who gave me the film and who actually had the patience to deal with the questions I had after the film. So here I am with all my questions regarding the film, and yeah, that's the story of how I came across the film. My paper is called Fostering Care Communities in Pema Sidhen's Balloon. I would like to start my paper by reading a little poem written by Tshering called The Monk and the Nun. This poem was written after a real encounter which took place in McLeodganj, where a Scottish man was selling postcards where a Scottish man saw a nun selling a postcards on the roadside and wanted to know why she was doing so. When a new Toyota Jeep driven by a monk passed by noisily, making the man wonder. So this is Tsering's reception of the event, and he writes, I'll quote, "Their faces look the same, but that is only natural. They are both Tibetan. Their robes also look the same, but that too is to be expected. Their dharma is the same. And it's not just their robes, nor also just their faces. Their vows are the same. Why then is one of them, the ample-bellied big one, dashing around in a Toyota? And why is the other one, the frail, sad-looking one, selling postcards by the roadside? Well, that is simply because the big one is a monk and the other only a nun. And while that is not true, that all monks are rich, not all nuns poor, yet between the monk and the nun, there seems to be a discrepancy which does not favor the nun. I found this poem to be a good epigraph for my paper today, as I would be looking at the role of women in Pema Sidhen's 2019 film, Balloon. Elaine Leader in The Family in a Global Perspective, A Gendered Journey, suggests, and I quote, "The family is a paradox. It is the most loving institution in our society, and yet it is also one of the most dangerous. In contesting the idea of a normative family, it appears perhaps that Leo Tolstoy in Anna Karenina had suitably foreseen that all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This paper will seek to address the paradox by closely analyzing the function of women in the film Balloon. The plot of the film is a seemingly simple story of a herdsman and his family, where they grapple with change, modernity, and grief. Dharge and his household comprises of his elderly father, his wife Dorkar, their 3 children, and Dorkar's sister Ani Shangchudroma, who visits them occasionally. They live amidst the large green plateau with a flock of sheep, and a newly received ram stands out as soon as the film begins. He's shown as not only a new member to the flock, but also a very strong and masculine one. The tone of the film at this point is joyful. The new ram is here to change a few things, namely a shy and docile ewe must be impregnated by him, as Dharge wonders about the possibility of her being a barren ewe. The newly added ram and the old existing ewe may also be read as a metaphor for the concurrent sexual desire of Dharge throughout the film. Dorkar, after seeing the ram on the first day, compares him to her husband and says, "He does look like you." The film, if one can attempt to summarize it, is about the everyday life of a family living in Tibet. A death in the family raises questions of reincarnation, autonomy, and free will. The most popular reading of the film is that of life in Tibet under the regime of Chinese authorities, where there are penalties to pay if you have more children than is allowed. The film is more or less trying to make us identify change while there is still time to do so. The protagonist, Dharge, an otherwise loving man, is struggling to hold together his religious beliefs while also honoring his wife's desire to curtail the number of children in the family. In one of the initial scenes in the film, we see in the background TV news of the first test tube baby being born in Britain, and the Popola sighs and says that the world has changed too much for him to see. Surprisingly, Dharge counters his father by saying that it's how science and progress go hand in hand, and the situation is not a doomsday as the Popola fears. On the other hand, before I move into it, I would like to show a few. This is the opening scene, which I'll be talking about. So if we can have a look at it, it'll be great. All right, I'll just read on till it, okay. All right, okay. So on the other hand is Ani Droma, whose life unfurls before us via a brief encounter with her lover in the past, Ugyal. He gives Ani a book which is the story of their relationship and how they may have misunderstood each other and therefore parted ways. The metaphor of the balloon holds significance for the characters in the film, namely for Dokar, as she is in constant need for balloons, a muted word for condoms, asking the doctor for more. It is the only way she can see herself supporting the family, that is by not having more children. For Dharge, balloon is a barrier in consumption of his marriage. When his desire overtakes him, he cannot be bothered about the balloon. For Anila, it is the book which she receives from her former partner that becomes a point of release from the past misunderstandings. However, there is no return from the path of dharma that she has chosen. The book named Balloon, suggesting that the reality was not as Anila imagined it to be. Hence, the balloon is a symbol of liberation and clarity for her. For the children in the movie, the balloons are playthings which can be bartered for a whistle, playfulness being exchanged for a whistle which stands for surveillance and order, or the light-hearted family setup changing to accommodate the rules of the colonizer. And most importantly, for the viewer, the balloons are symbolic of the Tibetan destiny under the Chinese occupation. Therefore, when the red balloons are let loose in the last scene of the film, everyone looks on to suggest the possibility and anticipation of change in a free world. The film also addresses the question of consent and how within the domestic conjugal space it may be more difficult to assertively say no. One, after all, concedes like Dorkar does despite the lack of protection available. The camera movement in the film is not voyeuristic. Even though it is in the bedroom, we are constantly made aware of what is to come as the newly brought ram has been let loose with the docile ewe and their process of breeding turned into a spectacle by the family. In both the animal world, where there is no possibility of the spoken consent, and the world of humans, we see these boundaries being crossed very subtly to make a point later in the film. Now I'll be talking about this opening scene. The opening scene of the film is a markedly nuanced entry point into the large green Tibetan plateau, where the visuals are unclear, fuzzy, and dreamlike. A minute or two into the film, it is revealed that it was a condom behind which the camera moves, giving to the audience a semblance of fuzziness. The initial lack of clarity in the visuals may also be a symbolic reference for what is to come in the film ahead, not to suggest that the audience may remain confused, but rather to be more mindful of the clarity they choose for themselves. As it would be apt to say that a movie like Balloon can successfully and poignantly parallel the issues of birth control with ancient beliefs like reincarnation, while giving the characters the space and dilemma to choose between an unplanned pregnancy and persisting it because the fetus might be the reincarnation of the protagonist's father. Towards the end of the film, we see that Dorkar and Anila have packed their luggage and are to stay in the monastery. The film does not clearly state as to why Dorkar is taking that step. However, the open ending lends us the assurance that she may come back to the household. It is at this point that I am interested in asking the care question. If the refusal to bear more children is seen as defiance and disregard for the customs, what is the audience to make of the situation when she insists that she will not be sleeping with Dharge as the condoms have been stolen by children? Can Dorkar's refusal to bear any more children be seen as merely selfish or as an extension of care, considering how the family is strapped for cash and has to sell sheep in order to pay for the eldest son's school fees? Similarly, can the act of choosing to be a nun after an abortion, Similarly, can the act of choosing to be a nun after the abortion Ani goes through be a call for dharma? or as an act of defiance to refuse to bear the injustices of the world in capacity of being a fertile woman? When do the women in the film choose the path of dharma? When the world rejects them, when the world around them fails to understand the language of care, do the women refuse domesticity to pay for, quote unquote, the sins committed by them? Or is the act of leaving the household an answer to the patriarchal standards and one endures in the household? When the women in the film refuse to perform their social reproduction roles, it becomes jarring to see how much of value has been accorded to them within the household. I read the departure of the women from domesticity into the spiritual as means of redemption, as the rupture in the Four Harmonious Brother. This is actually a scene in the film. This is beautiful green pasture lands. This is the first time I actually saw Tibet through this film. So this and I'll just show you. That's Dolkar, and that's her sister Ani Droma. Shangju Droma, her name was before she became a nun. And when she goes to the school to receive her nephew, she sees this drawing on in one of the boards. It's drawn. It's actually the Four Harmonious Brother. I'm going to read this picture, more into this picture, and talk a little about it. If we look at the women in the film, namely Drolkar, the wife, Bhumu Amchi, who's the doctor, who also we'll meet eventually, Dr. Drukso, and Shangshu Droma, before she became a nun, we see a web of connection where the women come together to be with each other as an act of looking out for each other. They are performing care. They recognize each other as I quote, the other who must be before the self. Now, I'm going to talk about care ethics, so it may not be very directly related, but I'll just show you the film, the scenes that I have used in the paper. That's Droma and Ani. They're discussing the ex-lover had given the book, which is also called Balloon, and this film is based on the book Balloon itself, written by Pema Sidhen. And that's Tagbum Gyal. He's the Tibetan Gela at Jamyang School. And this is very interesting. Shangjuk Droma, before she became a nun, it's very hazy actually, and that's after she has chosen the path of dharma. That's Dr. Druksu, who's discussing viable options. And in one of the scenes, she says that, I don't want this baby very clearly. So it's quite clear, it's not ambiguous at all of what she wants. She doesn't want it. And then the first son, the elder son, who was really loved by his popola, he goes to his mother and says that, please bear the child, he really loved me. So, he was so nice to you as well, why don't you just bear the child? But things have happened, and then he asks, will you become a nun like Ani, because you're going with her. And since I'm short on time and there is a lot I would like to discuss, I just want to show you the last part of the film. Juxtaposed with the first scene that I showed to you, because the first scene was very unclear because it's shot behind the balloon, and here the clarity is jarring. The balloons are just blowing away. So, yeah. I'll just take one more minute. I'm so sorry. Yeah. All right. Dorkar finally understands the decision of Ani Changchu Droma to be a nun. She sees her as a human being alone who suffered and had to part with a child. The Amchila sees Dorkar's anxiety at the news of pregnancy before she sees her as the vessel to carry the reincarnation. So the definition of care I would have expanded, but because of time constraints, I'm going to just end here. And I hope I made some sense. Thank you, Tujana.
Thank you. Very good presentation. So it's all about how Tibetan state responded to modernity and change. British they advanced to Sikkim, and Sikkim was turned into a modern state. But to enter the Tibet, they had to force their way through Tibet, because Tibetan state was not ready for the intervention of modernity and change at that point of time. So it's a very beautiful representation of how traditional Tibetan family battled the modernity and change. So it's a good presentation. So thank you, Ms. Aditi. Now we can go for a question and answer session. And we will take all the questions together first, because nature of the questions may match and they can all together answer. So we'll take some of the questions first.